Jamila Delacroix wasn't the kind of woman who enjoyed attention. Although she was the new CEO of the Banque Centrale de Paris and daughter of President Jacques Delacroix, she led her life discreetly, refusing any ostentation. That morning, dressed simply in jeans and a white shirt, Jamila headed to the main branch for a scheduled meeting with the branch manager. As she walked through the main entrance, intentionally bypassing the VIP section, she knew her appearance didn't betray her leadership role, but this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would mark that day with public humiliation. She went to the counter where a young employee, Sophie Martin, eyed her skeptically, tinged with contempt. Jamila, always polite, calmly explained that she had an important meeting with the branch manager. Sophie raised her eyebrows. "Madam, this counter is reserved for priority customers. Perhaps you should head to the other side, with the regular customers," she said, tapping her pen against the counter. Jamila frowned slightly without losing her composure. "I think I'm in the right place. I have an appointment here," she replied calmly. Sophie sighed and went to find her superior, Jean Lefebvre, the agency director, who arrived with a condescending air and crossed arms. "Madam, what is this urgent matter?" he asked curtly. Before she could even finish introducing herself, Jean interrupted her. "I don't know what you're talking about, but you don't look like a VIP client, much less a director. I'll have to ask security to intervene." And so the scene quickly turned into a nightmare. Jean Lefebvre, with his imposing posture and his careless attitude, stood guard. "It's inconvenient. This woman is disrupting our services. Get her out," he ordered curtly. Two security guards immediately approached, positioning themselves on either side of Jamila. Their intimidating presence caused the surrounding customers to whisper, and they began to take out their phones to film. Despite the tension, Jamila remained upright, without losing her composure. She had already experienced these suspicious looks, these gestures imbued with prejudice, but never to this extent. "Mr. Lefebvre," she said in a firm but calm voice, "I advise you to check who I am before making a mistake you'll regret." Jean gave a smirk, as if amused by these words. "Madame, spare us the hassle. I know my VIP clients very well, and you're clearly not part of that circle. The police will sort out your misunderstanding." A few minutes later, two police officers arrived, Inspector Michel Durand and Lieutenant Alain Dubois. As soon as they entered, they adopted the same condescending tone. "Madam, follow us," Michel ordered without even asking for her ID. "You're disturbing the peace here." Jamila calmly raised her hands in cooperation, yet inside her heart was pounding. She felt the weight of all these accusing looks, these whispers that reduced her to a fraud, simply because she was black, simply because she refused to conform to the stereotypes. As they asked her to leave, the customers' cameras captured everything, her straight eyes, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. She took a deep breath. She knew the moment of truth was approaching. As the police officers pushed her toward the exit, Jamila stopped dead in her tracks, planted her heels on the floor, and looked from one to the other. "All right," she said calmly, taking her phone out of her pocket. "If no one here will listen to me, I'll call someone who knows me." She dialed a number with a steady hand. Her fingers weren't shaking, even though the air around her vibrated with palpable tension. The officers and Jean exchanged puzzled glances. Silence fell in the lobby. Everyone seemed to be waiting for what was about to happen. "Dad? It's me, Jamila. I'm at the Central Branch," she began. "Yes. They arrested me in front of everyone. They refuse to believe I have an appointment here. Yes, I'll let you speak directly to your manager." She handed her phone to Jean Lefebvre, who stared at her as if she had just handed him a bomb. "Who? Who's on the other end of the line?" he stammered. "Jacques Delacroix," she replied, staring into his eyes. "The president of this bank, and my father." Jean turned livid. He picked up the phone with a trembling hand and began to listen to an icy voice yelling in his ear. The customers around him, now riveted to the scene, held their breath. You could even hear the videos on the phones capturing whispers. "She's the president's daughter. She's the new manager. My God." Jean, sweating profusely, finally handed the phone back to Jamila, his head bowed. His voice was almost inaudible when he spoke. "Ms. Delacroix, I offer my sincere apologies. We didn't know." Jamila picked up her phone again and hung up without even looking at it. She took a deep breath and crossed her arms. "Now that you know," she said, her voice cold but controlled, "are we finally going to be able to have this meeting, or do I have to keep calling the press?" The police officers, ashamed, took a step back, and Jean made a hesitant gesture to invite her back into his office. But Jamila didn't move. She stared at each of them, her eyes full of fire, her dignity unshakable. Jamila kept firm, but didn't stop, her eyes slowly scanning each face. Jean, the police, Sophie, the clients who were all on their cell phones. The silence was almost overwhelming. Jean tried to force a nervous smile and said, with a trembling voice, "Madame Delacroix, I, I beg you, come to my office. We'll sort this out. Immediately." Jamila let out a sob and gave a small whisper. "Sort this out? Do you think you can brush off what just happened as if it were an ordinary misunderstanding? No, Mr. Lefebvre, what you just did here is inexcusable." Sophie, the clerk, still petrified behind the counter, gripped the box cutter so tightly that her hands were shaking. Jamila turned to her. "And you, miss? How dare you humiliate someone simply based on their appearance? You were particularly quick to judge me. Perhaps we should discuss this before the disciplinary council?" Sophie's face turned pale. She tried to stammer something, but not a single word came out. Jamila faced Jean once more. "I'll tell you what we're going to do, Mr. Lefebvre. You're going to gather all your staff here in this hall, and you're going to explain to them who I am. You're going to explain to them why the central bank will never tolerate such racist and condescending behavior. You're going to do it now, and I'll decide then whether you deserve to keep your job." Jean's eyes widened, sweat trickling down his temple. "Yes, yes, Madame Delacroix," he stammered. The police, trying to show no emotion, started to leave quietly, but Jamila fixed her gaze on them as well. "And you two officers, I will also file a complaint against your unacceptable behavior, but you are free to go, for now." They nodded silently, lowering their heads before leaving. A moment later, Jamila's assistant entered quickly, holding a folder full of documents and a camera. She turned to Jean for the last instruction. "Go on, show them who's in charge." Jean called the staff, and everyone gathered in the lobby, still murmuring, confused, unsure whether to look at her, the floor, or the security cameras still recording everything. Jamila crossed her arms and waited calmly, radiating authority. When all the employees were assembled, managers, receptionists, security guards, even curious onlookers who had nothing to do with the scene, the silence was almost absolute. Only the clicking of cell phones and a few nervous whispers could be heard. Jamila stood in front of everyone, the assistant's folder open in her hands. She looked up and spoke clearly, without raising her voice, but each word cut through the air like a blade. "Pour ceux qui ne me connaissent pas encore, je suis Jamila Delacroix. Je suis la nouvelle directrice générale de cette banque, et je suis également la fille du président Jacques Delacroix." Face froze. Some employees gasped. Others instinctively took a step back. Jean Lefebvre seemed on the verge of fainting, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I came here this morning to observe this branch incognito," she said calmly, "to see how clients were treated. And what I saw is a disgrace to this institution." She paused, her dark eyes roving over each of them. "You publicly humiliated me without even trying to verify my identity. You judged my worth based on the color of my skin and the way I dressed. You spoke to me as if I were nothing. And yet, I'm the one who will be signing your paychecks this month." The murmurs grew louder. Some employees lowered their heads. Others stared at the floor in shame. "I didn't come here to be flattered or treated like a queen, but I can't allow this kind of behavior to continue at a bank that bears my family's name." She closed the folder firmly. "So this is what's going to happen. Mr. Lefebvre, you are suspended immediately, pending a final decision from the board. Ms. Martin, you too. And for everyone else, starting tomorrow morning, you will undergo mandatory training on diversity, respect, and inclusion. Those who refuse can look for other employment." Jean tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Sophie brought her hands to her face in disbelief. Jamila took a deep breath, turned to the customers who were watching in silence. and added, "And to those who filmed, thank you. What you saw here must not be forgotten. Banks, like all institutions, must be held accountable." She extended her hand to the assistant, who handed her a card with her personal contact information. "For any complaints, for any suggestions, I am available." Then she turned around and headed for the exit, leaving behind a hall full of stunned looks and a heavy silence. The next day, the scene was already in every newspaper and all over social media. The videos recorded by customers had gone viral. The president's daughter humiliated in her own bank, new director victim of racism by her employees, a lesson in dignity and power by Jamila Delacroix. Jamila's name dominated the headlines. Within a few days, thousands of messages poured into the company's headquarters, some congratulating her for her courage, others sharing similar stories of discrimination. However, instead of hiding or seeking blind revenge, Jamila decided to turn the episode into a driving force for real change. She called a press conference, surrounded by cameras, journalists, and an attentive audience. With the same calm and firmness, she spoke. "Ce que j'ai vécu hier, c'est ce que vivent des millions de personnes chaque jour. Je suis privilégié. J'avais les moyens et le pouvoir de me défendre. Mais combien ne les ont pas?" She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening, but her voice steady. "Dans cette banque, et partout ailleurs, nous devons juger les gens pour ce qu'ils font, pas pour ce qu'ils semblent être. C'est pour cela que je prends aujourd'hui l'engagement officiel d'investir dans un programme de formation, de sensibilisation et de promotion de la diversité pour que plus jamais personne ne subisse ce que j'ai subi ici." Applause echoed through the room. Many employees present were visibly moved. Some even cried quietly, touched by the strength of her words. The following month, the institution's internal policy changed radically. Jean Lefebvre was formally dismissed. Sophie publicly apologized and agreed to be transferred to another department after completing the new training. The police officers involved were investigated and suspended. Beyond the bank's walls, Jamila became a symbol of a new generation of leadership. Young, black, competent, and uncompromising in the face of injustice. She was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and forums on equality, always repeating the same message. Respect is not negotiable. It is owed to everyone unconditionally. Over time, the image of that morning ceased to be just a scandal and became a milestone. The day a woman decided it wasn't enough to be a director. She also had to be the voice of those who could not speak. Jamila smiled as she remembered the first hours of that chaotic morning. Now looking at the plaque on her new office door, which read, "General Director, Jamila Delacroix," she knew she was not just leading a bank, she was leading a change.